Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our stream here today. We are live with some amazing founders. I'm really excited to kind of dive into their stories with everybody. It's going to be an awesome live stream here with live on the Hedera week, lessons from Innovators. I've got 3 absolutely top-notch founders here with me. I'm really excited to introduce them to everybody here, get into their stories, their backgrounds, what brought them into Web3, and everything else. So we've got Manu, we've got Brady, Infron. So welcome everybody to this stream, and I'll let them introduce themselves if everyone kind of wants to start. Manu, you're next to me on my screen here, so if you want to kind of start, tell us a little bit about what you're working on and what brought you here today.
Yeah, well, thanks, Doug. I am Manu. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Kabila. We started Kabila in 2022, summer 2022, right? Just when the bear market was starting, and it was after the whole NFT craze, and with the idea of creating tools for creators and projects and founders, to create, launch, and manage their tokenized communities with NFTs. So in a way that they could, leverage NFTs with sort of utility in their own platforms or products or services, and that way, get some funding, get an engaged community, and get like that private space where they could engage with those holders. And yeah, it's been a while since then. We've been building different tools: a Launchpad, an NFT toolkit, marketplace, and now we're working on something a bit more social. But that's it. Yeah, creating everything for tokenized communities on Hedera.
Awesome, glad to have you here. Irfan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hi, Zach. Hi, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here. My name's Irfon. I'm the CEO founder of Dovu. So Dovu been around since 2017. We actually moved over from the Ethereum chain to Hedera. We did an ICO back in the heady days of 2017, and I can see the days of ICO are coming back again as Coinbase launched that, so the which is interesting and fun. Anyway, the what Dovu do is we tokenize ecological credits. So we take the world's carbon markets, and our mission is to tokenize that on Hedera. And the reason why that's important, it's a multi-billion-dollar market. It's really important that it's digitized. It's really important that it's scalable, and it's really important that everybody can participate in that sort of in that economy. So we've been doing that for a little while now, and we work with projects in India, we work with projects in the US, in South America, and yeah, I'll share some exciting news about where we're heading, with Dovu in the future.
Awesome, really glad for you to be here, and thank you for sharing that. Brady, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Brady. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Bonzo Finance Labs. I actually used to work for the Hedera network and the Hashgraph organization for about 5 years prior to starting Bonzo Finance Labs last year. And we are contributing to the open source development of the Bonzo Finance protocol. It's an open source, non-custodial DeFi protocol on the Hedera network that offers lending and borrowing, and very soon the ability to deposit liquidity into yield strategy vaults. So that's an exciting launch that we've got coming up. Our mission is to become the liquidity layer of Hedera. So basically a unified interface in which to be able to perform advanced DeFi functionalities and also interact with liquidity across the entirety of the Hedera ecosystem.
That's amazing. Yeah, the search for liquidity continues, and I think it's very, very important and needed for the continued success of our industry. And I really like how we have kind of a broad set of, perspectives here on this live stream. I think that will make for a really interesting conversation. So my next question is for all the speakers. I'll just start with this one. What inspired you to build on Hedera, and how did your entrepreneurial journey begin? This time we'll go in reverse order. So Brady, if you want to kick it off there.
Sure. Yeah. So, I've always been interested in startups and technology since I was like a kid. After graduating, I moved to San Francisco. I worked at a few tech companies. The first was a distributed database company called DataStax, and then the second was a company called Cloudflare that's in the security space. And at that time, around 2018, it was about as close of experience you could get for blockchain between distributed systems and security. And had a previous manager from a past job that started working at Hedera, reached out and extended an offer where he was building a team, and so jumped in and saw blockchain and DeFi in particular as definitely the future, and that's played out the way that it has. And then throughout that time, just wanting to learn as much as possible at startup organizations, build a safety net for myself, and then eventually make the jump to starting my own business. So it's been very much so like a long time coming, and have gained a lot of really valuable experience over that time, and met some amazing people that have like helped educate me on that journey. And so, yeah, culmination of many years of interest in the space. With regards to building on Hedera, obviously some bias having had worked at Hedera previously. But, when you look at the foundational functionalities of the Hedera network, and in particular what Hashgraph Consensus offers builders in DeFi, there's a significant number of advantages in building DeFi on the Hedera network over other alternative EVM or non-EVM networks. And some of the core things of that include these low fixed fees that the network offers, so predictability in cost, and then the ability to have fair ordering of transactions rather than a mempool. And so in DeFi, when you look at other networks, not having fair ordering of transactions results in, some call it a feature, others call it a bug, but MEV, sandwiching, things that impact the way that retail users and institutional users utilize decentralized finance, and ultimately, my view is it's sort of a negative. And on Hedera, because of fair ordering, low fixed fees, et cetera, those things aren't an issue within DeFi. And so, we see from a practical perspective that playing out very strongly, where DeFi functions in the way that I think it was intended to function on Hedera relative to some of these other networks. And we have a few blog postings on that on the Bonzo Finance blogs, definitely worth taking a look. One of them in particular talks about those benefits being applicable to liquidation bots. So definitely, if you're curious about that, check that out. But that's been the main reason. And also developer community, developers that we have on this call today, yourself and hosting it and being a contributor to the Hedera ecosystem. Tons of growth that has been taking place, especially over the last year or so, and expect that to continue. It's feels very early and growing very quickly for the Hedera ecosystem, and it's well positioned. So really excited about that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here and for getting into your story. I think we're going to dive in deeper into kind of what brought you here as we go on. Irfon, do you want to go next?
Yeah, life as an entrepreneur, punk punk music started my life as an entrepreneur. I'm a little farm boy in the middle of a village. Not in the village, on the farm in a village in the middle of Wales. Punk hit. I wanted to leave school. I was in a terrible punk band. We moved up to London, and we just thought, I don't need permission to do anything. We're just going to make music. We're just going to make shit happen, basically. And that's sort of formed my entrepreneurial career for the rest of my life. Was really the desire to sort of make something happen and not ask and wait for sort of for permission. So I did a number of businesses, before I discovered Web3 or crypto, as I sort of prefer to call it. The so the Yeah, I'd set up businesses, sold businesses, failed at businesses, just loved that sort of whole journey really. And then discovered crypto and thought this is just wild, talking about punk, talking about not needing permission, talking about creating something from scratch, and traveling a road that really isn't documented as well. All of those things really excited me as a sort of as an entrepreneur. Um, so actually, we started the business. We initially got funded by Jaguar Land Rover when we started the business. They had no idea the journey they were going to be going on with us, and you should have seen their faces when I said we were going to do an ICO. That was a sight to behold. But so like I say, we launched on Ethereum, and I knew nothing about Hedera. Matt Smithies, who's our sort of technical co-founder and CTO and the brains behind the whole operation, basically said, "Look, we there's a better option here than Ethereum." And Ethereum at the time, for what we were building, just didn't make sense. We had a project where we were tokenizing carbon credits, and we were using Ethereum, which at that time just wasn't carbon efficient at all. But also, you couldn't really build a global business when you were trying to bring in, hundreds of millions, if not billions, of credits into your system without really understanding what each transfer was going to cost us. And the great thing about Hedera is that we're able to know, every time that we ledger something, what that cost is going to be, and every time that transfer is, which makes a huge amount of sense. So from an environmental perspective, Hedera was the only game in town and the best game in town. From the speed and the cost and the efficiency, again, absolutely night and day between what Ethereum could offer and what Hedera could offer. So, Matt sent us down that direction, and it's been, absolutely fantastic for us. And we continue to sort of build on that. What excites me, however, is, I'm not a maximalist. I'm not really about one chain against another chain, you know. So the idea of Hedera stopping being an island, that's sitting out there on its own and just building more bridges and connections to the wider ecosystem, I'm all in for that. So at the moment, our token, Dovu token, is on Base, it's on Ethereum, and it's on Hedera, so we've always had that approach, and I think what's really exciting about the future of Hedera, and Brady was touching on it earlier, and I'm really excited to see the launch of what they're doing there is bringing liquidity in from different sources and connecting it to the wider ecosystem.
No, I would love to have been in that room when you talked to Jaguar about the the ICO. That's fascinating. Super cool. Awesome. Manu, do you want to go next?
Added
Yeah.
a punk rock
So
background. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
yeah, I mean, I started this, kind of like founder journey 10 years ago. The first time I joined a startup was an IoT startup. We were doing water monitoring IoT systems. We had some projects in Lebanon and Tanzania, and we were working on some pretty interesting stuff. But then that company ran out of cash, and then I was at the same time working on different projects related to hydroponics. My background is electrical engineering, so I was always curious on adding or using sensors and automating stuff for growing plants in my free time. And I started working in a company. We patented some vertical gardening systems, and we started growing the company. Had clients in restaurants, had clients in different like schools. We were using different vertical farming systems to grow herbs and vegetables in cities. But that time the COVID came, and from one day to the next, all our clients were closed. So at that time, that was 2020, and it was it was a hard time. I remember it was those moments that, okay, well, what I'm doing, should I be looking for other industries, or should I be looking for other things? And that time I started researching blockchain, and it was very interesting from the beginning. I also had other real estate business, and I was working both on that business and Kabila for the past 2 years, and then I finally sold my equity in that real estate business and just focused on Kabila. And why I started Kabila with my co-founders, with Adrian, Fran, and Adri, was because on Hedera, I started, I started researching different L1s. I was very curious on, okay, if this is going to happen, if we're going to tokenize everything, we need to find something that's going to really work. It has to be cheap, it has to be fast, it has to be secure. And to me, one of the most important things was it needs to be properly governed. And Hedera, definitely was something different. It had that governing council model where, it seemed very smart, and it seems something that could scale if things got thousands or billions of transactions going on in a chain. And I just started working and started playing with Hedera, using the NFTs, the first infrastructures that we had in 2021 with Tag Wallet, with Gomin at that time. But one of the key things was that I thought that NFTs were going to be a very useful tool for creating very engaged communities, and also as a tool for fundraising. And as I had this problem as a founder and in the previous startups, I thought that if we had the right infrastructure, and if we made it very smooth, and we had a good user experience, I thought it could be a good tool. And yeah, that's how everything started. And since there, we haven't stopped building. So yeah, it's been a while since then.
Well, let's go. The crowd goes wild. That's awesome. I really appreciate that. And we've got 7,000 people listening to us here on X. So you can just imagine that stadium, 7,000 people. It's a good amount of people, and it's cool to see. And I love hearing all of your backgrounds, because Web3 is such a diverse space in terms of experience and other things, and what brings people in and their backgrounds is always so different. And I think that's why this space is so cool, because we all come into crypto or Web3 in different ways, and it always kind of builds out our own kind of individual experiences, which help shape our companies. So the next question I have is, what was the most unexpected challenge or turning point in your startup journey so far? And whoever wants to go first on that one.
I mean, I can cover that. I mean, the ICO we did was just crazy. It was the peak of ICO time. We were on top of this hotel in Barcelona. The locals were rebelling in the streets below. They were, trying to separate from Spain, that region. There was police helicopters flying over. Somebody pressed the button to go live with the ICO, and suddenly you've got sort of all this activity sort of hitting, and it's weird. It's the sensation of that should have been, my God, that's amazing. We've got all of this Ethereum, Bitcoin arriving. We've launched a successful ICO, but actually, it was more like shit. The rails just aren't there. What do we do? How do we pay people? What's the tax situation like? How do I build a business? Because we were all interested in building. A lot of people in the ICO phase, they just pocketed the cash and sort of turned themselves into VCs, or just sailed off into the sunset. And hey, some of them, that's their thing, you know. But look, we were builders, so the challenge, there was a huge challenge to sort of actually build a business with this capital that you just raised, because banks didn't want to know. You know, setting up fiat, you know, sort of accounts that you could pay people in different parts of the world. It was an absolute sort of nightmare. And also the regulatory fear that you'd done something that you shouldn't have done, you know. So all of those aspects of it, I think for me, that was the biggest challenge, to get your mindset, you know, out of you know, because the funding of your company is just the first part of your journey, you know, and it isn't the end journey. And I think that's the key, certainly in our world. So that was the biggest challenge, really, is to sort of actually trying to build a business with ICO generated funds. It sounds like a luxury. Don't get me wrong. I'm not moaning about it, but it was a real challenge.
Yeah, I bet. And then trying to keep the community engaged through the ups and downs, because you can be building a good product and sometimes all people care about is token price. So,
Well, just on that, I mean, we had death threats. We've had police guards on some
geez,
members
man.
of the staff. We've had all of that through the sort of cycle, especially after when the ICO bubble burst, you know, and token prices dropped significantly. You know, then obviously it was our fault. But yeah, we've had members of the team with police outside. You know, I can't count the amount of death threats I've had. So when the company's doing well now, I take it with a pinch of salt, because it can turn really quickly. And when we're doing badly, I've got a thick enough skin now to know that it's, you know, hey, it's not my fault if somebody's overextended themselves, you know. And as long as we treat everybody fairly and how we message the business, then everybody can sort of sleep at night. So you know, those are the things that are unexpected, and I think maybe unique to crypto when you try to start to build a company in crypto, is you've immediately got a very emotional audience that have a different timeline than you as a builder.
Wow, that is, yeah, no, I mean, you got to develop some thick skin to go through things like that. That was rough to hear, but I'm glad, you know, you've been able to get through that difficult time. Manu, what has been the most unexpected challenge for you, or turning point?
Yeah, I would say those were also challenges that we face. You know, the challenge of getting the cash, enough cash. I was talking with the team that it seemed like every summer we were running out of cash, and then we were back on the race. So it's always been, you know, difficult in that sense, especially when we started, you know, Web3 startup on a bear market. We were able to face that, and then the ups and downs. It's especially this cycle, I would say it's been crazy. And yeah, of course, you want to build a business that's not going to be dependent on the cycle, but we are in Web3, and a lot of attention and a lot of volume and a lot of, you know, things, nice things happen when you have that volume and that attention, no? So that was a challenge, and I would say regarding that, having the team focus on the mission, whatever it happens. No, it's when things are going well, it's very easy to know that you're doing, or you're going the right track. But when things are not going that good, then you need to be, you know, solid, and you need to be committed, and you need to be, you know, you need to keep building. So I would say those were the main challenges. You know, the ups and downs. You know, getting the cash. You know, to go through whatever it takes, and then, you know, being, you know, keeping focus on the mission that we have. So yeah, that's been hard.
100%. Yeah, it's always about managing your balance sheet as you kind of go through these things and make sure you can sustain for the long term. But it sounds like everyone here recognizes that, which I think in this industry is very, very important. Brady, what about you?
I think as these guys mentioned, it is expensive to operate a business. It is, you know, those costs start to add up. And I think looking at it prior to starting things, not acknowledging all of the smaller pieces that come into play that have costs associated with it. You're managing that. You're managing so many um, so many administrative things. Like, it's of course so fun to start a business, and there's a lot of passion involved in it, and it's exciting. And I think when you think about it, I think we all tend to gravitate towards thinking about all of the exciting parts of starting a business, the parts that we love. Maybe you're more focused on like and excited by building products, or maybe it's around like the marketing side, or maybe it's the engineering side. But when you're responsible from everything from the top down, there's so many things that you have to do and quickly learn about and educate yourself on, that are often more administrative or regulatory, or all these other like little pieces that are important. And so you do end up spending a lot of time on things that like are maybe less exciting, and they are challenging because it's oftentimes things that you just don't have experience doing, and so you're learning very quickly. And so it's fun from that perspective, but also I think it's a lot of stress that you go through, and you need like a significant amount of persistence to get through that. So that's been the more challenging side of things on my end. And it helps to
Yeah,
have a really good team, having a team that, knowing what your blind spots are and people that you can have join you and support everything that you're trying to do and achieve your mission is really important.
agreed. I mean, some people forget that it really is the four people, or the people in between the four walls, as we say, inside the building, that makes the company. And a lot of people just imagine these or like companies as kind of faceless entities, but they're not. There's real people there who are putting their passion, their time, and their energy into building these things. And I think that's really important for our audience to remember, is that founders are people too. It can be really tough, and be kind, because it is challenging, and everyone's trying their best. So the next section we have is building on Hedera. We're going to go into some individual questions for the speakers here, starting off with Irfon. For viewers new to Dovu, how would you describe what the project does in simple terms? So imagine you're speaking to a grandmother, in other words, and one that doesn't know too much about crypto. Maybe your grandma is a degen, I don't know, but oh, you're on mute, man. Sorry. I always do that too.
Hey, it's the grey beard. Take a look at Dovu. So first of all, what problem is Dovu trying to solve? So when we took a look at the global carbon credit marketplace, okay, what we saw was a very dysfunctional, old-fashioned way of doing business, and we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar business here. We had everything in silos, from a database of registries, which hold in who holds what credit, and what does a credit relate to. We have multiple of these sort of siloed registries. You have a business run by consultants, which are very expensive to sort of engage with. And then you have the sales side of it, which are basically OTC desks, which would be building relationships with these credit buyers around the world, and would be emailing them a list of credits that are available, or picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, I've got 10 credits. Do you want to buy some?" And you got everything in between. So it's a very dysfunctional sort of business, and it's all analog. It's just not. It's all, I'd say, analog. It's Web 1 with a bit of Web 2. Um, and people don't trust it. It's massive lack of trust because of it's just not transparent. It's really hard to sort of get a grip as to what's going on. So we took a look at this and we said, look, I'll tell you what we want to do. We want to build an end-to-end platform that digitizes credits directly from the producers of these credits. And we're going to build this huge warehouse. Imagine a great sort of huge Walmart warehouse full of ecological credits around the world. We want them all in this huge warehouse. We want all of them priced, correctly. We want the data to be searchable. And then we want to build an API, there's something that can plug into this warehouse, and you can quickly spin up a landing page, which could be a marketplace anywhere around the world in your local language, connect to our supply, and people can go and buy these credits. So end-to-end solution, which is efficient, and more importantly, well, it's cost efficient. It means that the money can flow from the project developer that they're doing, from the buyer, in a matter of days, as opposed to 6 months in the old sort of cycle. It also means that as we go forward, these credits are going to be discovered by robots. It's going to be the chat GPTs of the world that are going to find these credits. Somebody's going to just basically say, as a carbon credit buyer, I'd like, to buy 1,000 credits from a farm in Dakota. I want to pay $60 per credit. Where can I find it? It'll search for it, find it, and they'll be able to buy it. We've built that system, from the neck up, basically, to sort of do that. Say the neck up because it's built on the backbone of Hedera. So Hedera, and then Dovu, and then the sort of user interface that sort of fits in. So that's in effect what we do is digitize, tokenize the carbon credit marketplace. And just to put that into some sort of perspective, we've been doing it for many years without much success financially because we've been focused on the building. But we just recently signed $1 billion deal. That's $1 billion of carbon credits coming to Dovu, built on Hedera. I was just come back from Houston, from Rice University in Houston, where I was presenting a couple of days ago with the project that we signed the deal with, basically. So it's real, it's happening. It's been built on Hedera. The reason for Hedera, moving to Hedera is because, as I said before, the price, the scale, the efficiency of it all. So we're actually talking about something real world now. And yeah, that's in effect what Dovu does. It digitizes things that are happening in the real world assets, tokenized on Hedera, and and delivered via Dovu.
Awesome. Yeah, no, appreciate that. That kind of helping us walk through that. And I think everyone who's watching here, I think if you're not following Dovu, you definitely should make sure you're staying updated with everything they're building. Brady, so what is Bonzo Finance's mission and vision? When building Bonzo Finance, what opportunities did Hedera infrastructure open up for DeFi development?
Yeah, so our mission is to become the liquidity layer of Hedera, and what that means is, we initially started development of the open source Bonzo Finance protocol with decentralized lending and borrowing. So it filled a gap in the DeFi ecosystem on Hedera that was needed. Credit markets, when you look at any economy, credit markets are a necessary table stakes primitive that are required. That is the case, I think, for ecosystems and networks in Web3, if you view these networks as sort of economies or nation states. And with that foundation of liquidity that's built through a credit market, there's a number of things that can be done that are built on top of that foundational layer, which utilize the underlying layer. So you can look at like perpetuals and futures markets, other advanced DeFi protocols where they have a reliance on that layer of liquidity. Ultimately, with the addition of Bonzo vaults that are coming out, those have a reliance on the lending protocol, depending on these vault strategies that are deployed, basically automating liquidity throughout the ecosystem and routing it to various protocols like the Lend protocol or decentralized exchanges like Saucer Swap, and helping employ those strategies for end users that deposit liquidity to help maximize yield and make it even easier for them to participate. So continuing to sort of knock down various aspects of the DeFi ecosystem to make available within the Bonzo Finance interface, and allow for folks to come to the interface and sort of have access to many parts of DeFi across the Hedera ecosystem. With regards to Hedera's usage and adoption, I think, as mentioned before, there's tons of benefits of building on Hedera. Irfon cited a number of these with regards to just the speed at which the Hedera network operates, the fair ordering of transactions, the fast finality. All of these things sort of culminate together into a better end user experience, better safety, more predictability. So just a significant amount of benefits having Hedera being this underlying network on which the liquidity layer and DeFi protocols are built on top of. So it's been great for us so far, and it just ultimately ends up being a better user experience for whether you're a retail user or an institutional user in the ecosystem.
Agreed. No, I think it's fascinating to kind of see how Hedera has evolved, and the future's looking bright. So I think everyone here is building really important things that are going to help it continue to grow. Manu, could you introduce Kabila? From your perspective, how has the NFT landscape on Hedera evolved recently, and what sets it apart from other ecosystems?
Yeah. So Kabila, as we were mentioning before, it's a place for creating, launching, and managing tokenized communities. So the first question is, okay, why should I be launching, or why is tokenized community important, or how that it helps is projects or founders or any kind of projects. So there are three main things that you gain when you actually build a tokenized community. The first one is you are getting access to new revenue lines. It's a different way of funding your project or your needs. It doesn't have to be always through equity. Now that you have NFTs, utility NFTs, we've seen that happening, where you can create an NFT collection that provides some sort of utility or benefits within the community, within the product, platform, services that you provide, and that it's going to benefit the biggest funds, and then it will also help you with funding. And that was a big hypothesis that we had when we started, because when we started, again, we were in July 2022, the NFT season was over, but we thought that, okay, maybe if you do it the right way and you are transparent and you're building something real, and if you go step by step and you do batch minting and you grow organically, maybe this could work also in when there is not a cycle. And it worked. It helped us a lot. Fund. It was a very important revenue line in Kabila, but also other projects on Hedera have been launching NFTs, with a lot of success, and I think that was a very interesting, tool for them. The other one is we have measured that 10.29% of your audience in social media like Twitter, X, YouTube, that ends up in NFT projects, ends up converting into holders. So that 10% is where you want to create that tokenized community. That will be the people in your project that will be the most engaged. That will be the ones that are most interested in anything that you launched. That will be the ones that are interacting, and that 10% of people become your holders. No, so it's a way of creating loyalty in a way that everyone knows that they're now in the same boat for real with through that NFT or through that token. And I think that's very powerful. And I think many companies, as we refine the infrastructure over the next years, will be using more and more NFTs and tokens. There's a difference. You can do it with NFTs or you can do it with tokens. My experience is I would always recommend someone who is starting to do it with NFTs. You get the same, more or less, you get the same benefits, but it's a lot easier. I would never recommend someone start right away with a token. It's a lot harder, and you can do the same starting with NFTs, and maybe later you can launch a token. So that's where we are focusing. We're focusing on doing everything with NFTs at the beginning. And the third thing is that through that NFT, you are actually owning that community. And it's very interesting because now you're finally building something that is very important for your project or your community, which for your project, which is your community. And through that token, you are now owning that relationship with your community or your holders, no? And that's a way of building a community that's going to be, that you're going to be able to own and use in different platforms, no? But you will be always, the owner of that relationship. So I think that's what we do at Kabila. We are trying to build that space where you can create, launch, and manage that tokenized community in a simple way. And in terms of how I see the other NFT ecosystem, I think it's quite mature right now. It's been a lot of development in the past 3-4 years, with Kabila, with Semtex, with Atlantis, Hashpack. We've been building a lot of things. And I think if we see a new NFT season, or we see a new alt season or something, a lot of people will realize that there is a lot of fun things and a lot of things that you can do on Hedera with NFTs, and the experience will be unmatched, compared to other chains, I think. So I think we're ready, we're prepared. We just need people to come back to the space, and we'll see.
As kind of a follow-up there, what would you say is the main benefit of, because you mentioned you can do tokens or NFTs, what would you say the main benefit is of doing an NFT versus a token?
I mean, it's in my experience, it's a lot easier. The problem with tokens is that everything focuses on price. I'm not saying that doesn't happen on NFTs, but it happens in a different way. You have art, you have rarity, you have different things, and you can go step by step. You can go little by little. When you launch a token, you're launching a token. That's it. It's on or it's off. But with NFTs, you could create a collection of 10,000 max supply, but you could start with 100 NFTs, and you will get your first 70 holders. And from there, you start building and you start creating. And then as your community grows, you can grow your supply. Then you don't have to be worrying about, creating pools, liquidity pools. You don't need to worry about, managing the whole thing of what means, really launching a token, if you want to do it right. No? So I would say that for many smaller projects and creators, NFTs probably will be the best way to get started. Once eventually, when you have a lot of, big community and a good infrastructure and real utility for that, then it might make sense to, think in launching a token. That's my opinion, of course. It's based on my experience, but I think NFTs are the best tool for getting started in Web3 or tokenized communities.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it's interesting because even though they both have prices, people feel more attached to NFTs almost than tokens, which I find very interesting. It's almost like somewhat of a personal attachment sometimes to an NFT. Brady, let's talk about Bonzo vaults. A little bit of a shift here. How do these automated yield strategies reshape DeFi participation on Hedera? Bonzo has been experiencing cross-chain liquidity. How significant is this for Hedera's DeFi growth?
Yeah, so I'll answer the cross-chain liquidity portion of that question first. So, when you look at liquidity as a metric for the Hedera DeFi ecosystem, liquidity is the key metric that allows for running everything. Initially, Hedera had the bridge Hashport as its sort of native bridge to bring liquidity into the ecosystem from other networks across the industry. Major assets like wrapped Bitcoin, stable coins like wrapped DAI and USDC, wrapped Ethereum. But ultimately, in order to be able to facilitate more liquidity coming in of these major assets, which have the largest total addressable market, more bridging infrastructure is required. And so, what we've seen over the last 6 months or so is, Hedera taking a stronger stance with regards to implementation of an integration into cross-chain infrastructure. So layer 0 being one of those marquee ones, and then also Axelar. And this quarter, one of the biggest developments was the introduction of wrapped ETH via Layer 0, and being able to bridge wrapped ETH into the ecosystem using the Stargate bridge. And the more venues that are available for retail and institutional users to drive liquidity into Hedera from other networks, the better off the Hedera DeFi ecosystem is. There's obviously like native assets that exist on the Hedera network. So there's native USDC, there's HBAR and its liquid staking token HBAR-X. There's ecosystem assets, and all of those are great and really important. But ultimately, I think to create the kind of retention that the ecosystem and the network wants to see, it needs to support a large diversity of assets that have the largest total addressable market. So, users within Hedera shouldn't have to go to another network in order to participate in DeFi with assets and get exposure to assets like wrapped Ethereum or wrapped Bitcoin. They should be able to do all of that within the Hedera ecosystem and not have to switch networks. And ultimately, I see cross-chain infrastructure and the bridging of liquidity into Hedera as one of the most impactful things that the network and the ecosystem could focus on. Liquidity is necessary to bring in more users. It's necessary for institutions, especially because institutions are playing with far more significant amounts of funds, and so they need to be operating within an ecosystem that has the liquidity that allows for them to operate at the scale that they're operating at. And it also is sort of a prerequisite and a foundational layer to having things like real world assets be available within the ecosystem. To use real world assets within a DeFi context, you likely need to have enough stablecoin liquidity to be able to facilitate the buying and selling of these assets within the ecosystem. And so, all this stuff, the crypto ecosystem, I think, and crypto assets are sort of a prerequisite to having this next phase of DeFi that we're starting to see come online across the entire industry be successful with the adoption and issuance and usage of real world assets. Carbon credits are a great example of that. With Dovu, is you need to have enough liquidity within the ecosystem to be able to support large amounts of buying and selling of those types of assets. So that's really important. And then off the back of that, Bonzo Vaults is a new protocol that's being deployed within the Bonzo Finance ecosystem that is in support of increasing liquidity. So today, when you look at users who have maybe HBAR, USDC, HBAR-X, various ecosystem assets, bridged majors, et cetera, in their wallets within the DeFi ecosystem, the next question they often ask is like, well, what can I do with these assets now that it's in a self-custody wallet and there's all these different DeFi tools and protocols available? Usually it's trying to figure out how to put those assets to work. And oftentimes doing so can be a lot of manual maintenance or complex. There's a learning curve. One example of that is like when you're supplying liquidity to a decentralized exchange like SaucerSwap. Their V2 pool infrastructure, it's based on Uniswap V3. There's significant amount of configuration and maintenance that's needed in order to participate in that. You have to set the ranges at which you're supplying the liquidity. You have to provide both sides of the pool for whichever pool it is that you're depositing into, and then you have to maintain it. So as prices change, depending on how tight that concentration is that you've decided to supply your assets in, and again, the tighter the concentration, in this example, the more yield that you can earn by doing so. And so all of that takes a lot of learning and figuring out how it works, and then also maintenance. And so what Bonzo Volts is an attempt to do is ease that learning curve, ease the amount of maintenance that a user has to perform manually themselves, and also tries to maximize the amount of yield that someone can earn, whether a retail user or an institutional user, for putting their liquidity to work. And so these vaults automate the management of liquidity, and through that automation, try to maximize the earnings that someone could earn for participating in the ecosystem. So it routes liquidity across these different protocols and actively manages it for the user. It is all non-custodial and decentralized. So, no individual organization can touch funds, for example, that are placed inside of a vault. And there are also benefits that extend beyond the user and to the ecosystem. Using the saucer swap example again, the tighter concentration of liquidity that you have in those saucer swap pools, and the more actively managed that liquidity is, the better off are the people trading against those pools. So if you're trading on a decentralized exchange, you are using those pools, and those pools need to be maintained in order to prevent price impact and slippage and some of these potentially negative or costly effects of using a decentralized exchange. And so by having a significant amount of liquidity that's being actively managed in those pools, it actually further helps the ecosystem. People who are using the saucer swap protocol, again, in this example. And then vaults are also permissionless. So if you're a developer in the Hedera ecosystem and you have ideas on various liquidity management strategies, you can build vaults that automate that strategy that you've come up with and deploy it and make it available for other folks across the ecosystem to utilize. And in building and deploying a strategy, the incentive there for developers is that you earn a small percentage fee off of any yield that's earned by users using that vault. So it does open up the door to more development within the ecosystem, driving more usage of these protocols, more opportunities for users within the ecosystem to earn rewards and yield. So yeah, not just the user side with retail institutional, but also the developer side is addressed with the addition of vaults in our ecosystem. And I do view vaults as sort of like a kind of a table stakes primitive within DeFi ecosystems. You've seen, the concept of vaults isn't necessarily like an extremely new innovation. You see things like this via Beefy Finance, for example, which plugs into a number of other EVM networks, or on Hyperliquid, they have vaults as well that you can deploy into, where there's automated trading strategies or yield-focused strategies that are available. And so I just see this as like a big and important evolution of Hedera's DeFi ecosystem that's going to be more critical long-term.
Awesome. And I had just a quick follow-up from the audience because I think it's kind of relevant. This is from Hashgraph Stream. Did you patent the protocol or license it?
For Bonzo?
Yep.
Bonzo is a fully open source protocol with open source licensing, so anybody can fork it, modify it, deploy it in production. For Bonzo Lend, it is based on the Aave, open source Aave protocol. And then for Vaults, it's a combination of a few open source protocols, including Beefy. And all of that code is open sourced and freely available for anybody to utilize.
Awesome. Thank you, Brady. Appreciate that. And yeah, open source is the way to go. If you're not building open source in Web3, that's all right, but maybe you should consider building something more open source. Irfon, what are some of the latest updates on product milestones from Dovu that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. One is the sort of idea of finding product market fit that every entrepreneur wants to get to, where they go, actually, wow, it's sort of happening. So I think, very proud of, as I say, the size and the pipeline that we've got for deals that are now flowing into Dovu. Proud on behalf of the team that have put a huge amount of effort and energy into that. So that's exciting. But everybody knows, you can't just sit there and applaud yourself. You got to sort of move on. And some of the things that I'm really excited about is part of the process that we've had to go through in order to get to where we are right now is start to automate workflows, and automate sort of, because every project that needs to get something digitized within Dovu had to go through a scientific methodology. For example, if you wanted to plant trees, a scientist would have to verify that the trees would actually draw down carbon and therefore qualify for a carbon offset, on its most sort of primitive level. So we built some AI tools to speed up the process of linking the project who weren't scientists into the methodology that was needed in order for them to get their assets, their real world assets, their credits to the marketplace. What that sort of led us down is to a new product called Flow, and we'll be testing Flow this month. I'm really excited about that, and we're hoping to launch it to the public sort of early Q1 next year. Flow is a sort of very simple user interface for you to create your own workflows. You need to have some Dovu in order to use the system, and you learn from Dovu when those flows are being used. So any workflow, and we've given some examples on our sites actually. That could be from the supply chain of Wagyu beef through to the issuance of a driving license in the UK, and everything in between. Any workflow that you can think of. Some of the ones that some projects we've already chatted to who want to launch workflows on, sign-offs of their digital wallets for treasury management. It can range from a whole raft of different things. So I think flow is going to be a really important element within the sort of Dovu ecosystem. It fits into the real world asset structure that we're really sort of part of, where credits is one element of that, the carbon credits. And yeah, definitely check that out. We'll be announcing a bit more of that soon. And that ties into our thesis as well, of the idea that, blockchains are really good at ledgering something that's happened. So it's proof that something's happened, but it doesn't give context as to why it's happened or the agreement to make that thing happen in the first place. And I think Flow really puts, slots into there. And as we enter more of an agentic sort of economy, having context of why something's happened is going to be just as important as ledgering the fact that it has actually happened. So context and proof are two things that are going to be needed in order to build trust. And really that's where Flow sort of sits into this sort of equation, is that we're going to be able to provide the context around any agentic activity as well as ledger and proof that it happened. And like I say, we've published something in the blog fairly recently. Check that out, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that very soon.
Stay tuned for that, guys. And again, if you're not following any of the speakers, definitely should be. Make sure to follow them. Manu, why should companies consider launching tokenized communities, and how does Kabila make that process accessible?
Yeah, I mean, not all companies should be thinking of launching a tokenized community, but I would say that almost all companies that have an online presence and online communities should definitely consider launching a tokenized community eventually, especially if they have. The tokenized communities help again in having a more loyal community, so you can create that space where 10% of your most loyal people, which are the holders, are going to be active. They're going to be having a chat or talking in a forum where they can engage, that they can be a bit more updated with everything that's going on the project. So I think that has a lot of value. Then of course, if you have products and services, it will help have that channel where you can increase probably your sales rates, and you could be getting a lot more exposure when everything is coming new. But in general, I would say tokenized communities build more robust communities, because it's good for the company, but it's also good for the holder. In a way, let's say if you like a specific business or you are a fan of a creator, you could that way get into more premium benefits into that community. You could use those benefits and utility of the NFT for years, and after that, you could decide, okay, I want to keep using it, or I want to leave, or I'm now just interested in different stuff. But you have something that has been acquiring or getting the value of that community and project, and then you can sell it. So it's a good way of conserving the value that you are providing to a company as a holder, a community member. No, so I think it's a very interesting win-win for both loyal fans and project owners. The other thing is it's cash. It's a good way. It's a different tool. It's an alternative tool for raising funds for a project, especially when you're getting started. And the third one is a good way of owning one of your most important assets, which is the connection with your community. So I would say those are three key things. One of them is solving one of the problems that all of the companies that we're in this call mentioned, which is cash flow. But we definitely need and how we are helping solve that in Kabila, and that's what I think we need now is as Irfon was saying, like, we have validated product market fit in the Web3 field. Now the challenge is validating product market fit in the Web2 world. So making this happen on a regular basis in regular companies, sport clubs, startups. That's the real challenge, and that's where we're working now. So in Kabila, what we're doing is simplifying the whole thing, from creating the collection of NFTs, launching that collection, and having space for playing with the community, managing the community, everything into one single space. That's what we're doing, and that's what we'll be announcing, which is called Kabila V3. So that's how we're working, with the tools, making them a lot more easy to use. Also with consulting, we are, always, consulting. I mean, we're providing, a lot of insights to projects when they are launching. How many NFTs should I launch? What's the price we should put? What's the strategy we should follow to launch the NFTs? So those are things that we provide. And then, of course, we try to provide some sort of marketing back and support in that sense. So yeah, everything to really launch and manage the tokenized community in the smoothest way that's possible. Awesome.
And then just one final question for the panelists, and this one is a community question. And this is from Hedera Hashgraph. If someone's building from scratch today, what's one mistake you'd warn them to avoid?
That's a good question. There are many mistakes. Picking one.
I think it's really hard. I think I'd like to answer that in a sort of different way, and that is a really cliched. You've got to start with the end in mind. So the biggest mistake that people make, I think, the one you need to avoid if you're starting, is to build without thinking what your end game looks like, because and then choosing a platform that technically is going to be a fit for your end game as a project or as a company, and not a fit because it's fashionable or where everything is right now. So that's the only advice I'd give, is to choose something that's going to be a partner with you for the journey ahead, with the best knowledge that you've currently got at your fingertips.
Yeah, I'd say my advice and I don't think this is necessarily specific to building on Hedera, but more so just general advice is you're gonna run into decisions every single day where I think you have to ask yourself, is the decision that I'm making here something that is going to be something that I can easily change in the future, or something that is pretty immutable, something that I'm not, it's going to be really difficult for me to be able to actually change this decision after I make it. And you only have, a finite amount of energy to make decisions every single day, which we're all doing. And focusing that energy on decisions that are going to be really tough to change in the future, and making sure that you're being very thoughtful about those decisions and not sweating too much the decisions that you can change or adapt later is really important. So spend the most energy that you have on the challenging decisions and questions that are going to be really tough to alter in the future. And more about like energy conservation on decision making. And that can be technical, it can be regulatory. There's so many different sort of perspectives there that you could apply that to.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, yeah,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I don't know, but there are many different things. Of course, you should, try to avoid. In my experience, at least, I think trying to focus on a niche within a niche, especially at the beginning, it's a good way of having success or little wins when you are getting started. Trying to be very generalistic, especially today with how things move, how fast things move, it's a bit hard. So maybe finding a niche within a niche, it will help you find that little problem that you want to solve, and from there iterate and move and maybe try to solve broader and bigger problems. But yeah, I would say always niche projects have higher success rates. So I think that's important.
Awesome. And then final question here for the panelists. How do your products complement each other within the Hedera ecosystem? How do they help each other out, in other words?
Well, we're using Bonzo, for example. In Kabila, we have KVL token, and we reach out very soon, and there we have the a pool for the KVL token then, so people can provide and can borrow KVL tokens in the platform. So I think that's something we're very happy with, and it worked pretty well. So yeah, the projects that we're working on there normally have different ways we're interacting with each other.
Yeah. I mean, the same. Obviously, Bonzo is a key part of the ecosystem when it comes to projects like ours that have tokens. It's a key part of that. But I think over and above that, we should all be. If we all succeed, we're going to bring more eyes and attention to the community. We're going to bring more liquidity to the community. So this isn't a sort of competitive sport. I don't believe we all need to focus on our own sort of value proposition. The other bit, and you touched on that a little earlier, Zach, is open source and use of product. We should all be looking at what others are doing, within our sort of ecosystem, and saying, "Hey, that's great. We can learn from that," and again, that collaborative effort is really positive. So I think that whether it's overtly, such as depositing tokens within Bonzo, or whether it's just meeting up, having events like this, just keeping an eye on each other's projects, willing each other to succeed, which is certainly the attitude of Dovu, is we all benefit from that sort of mentality, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah, not much more to add onto what these guys are saying. There's integration aspects between the projects. Dovu and Kabila tokens in Bonzo Finance for lending and borrowing. We utilize the integration with Kabila Wallet, so users who are holding their assets in the Kabila Wallet being able to connect into the Bonzo Finance protocol and using the protocol through that wallet interface. And then there might there's this is a very long-term thing, but the industry is starting to see the adoption between credit markets and real world assets. And so exploration of what are those real world assets that are available across the Hedera DeFi ecosystem, and can those be utilized, whether it's from like a vaults perspective or being able to collateralize real world assets and borrow against them. And so nothing that exists today with regards to this, but the potential for maybe some long-term integrations where carbon credit maybe could be something that's collateralized and borrowed against. There's lots of opportunities there that exist.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you so much to our speakers here, to the Hedera team, to the folks running the stream in the background. Everyone has to come together as a true team to pull these live streams off. We appreciate our, I think we're at like 22,000 viewers right now, so really appreciate everybody who's tuned in and watching this. This is just like one of the first episodes on the Hedera week, so really appreciate everybody. And thank you guys so much. Make sure to follow all of the speakers, follow their companies. You're not going to regret hearing from them. And we hope everyone has a great week.